We are starting a new teaching series this morning, and it's called Be Human: Work, Rest, and the Art of Being Human. And I have a few questions to begin with. I like starting new series in this way to get us thinking. And question one is this: if you could do anything with your life, anything, the sky is the limit, what would you do? Anything whatsoever. And I realize that a lot of us stop asking this question at a certain point in our lives. I don't know if I've gotten to that age yet, but I'm inching closer, I think. We grow up and we think that anything is possible as children. And we imagine that we can do anything, and so we start on our pursuit of fulfilling whatever dream that would be. But at a certain age, I think we stop asking this question because the older we get, the odds of letdown to answering this question can be really high. And so the second question is this. I just want to say I like that I have people sitting in the front row today. Usually people move as far away as possible, but I like that. Question number two is this: do you like what you do? And so this is a present reality question. Consider your place of employment, your season of life, all those things. Do you like what you do? And if you work a job, a vocational job that involves an income and going to work, this question, do you like what you do, is not the question of, do you have a good job? Because you can talk to a lot of people and you say, do you enjoy what you do? And they say, well, it's a good job, but do you like what you do? You know, it pays the bills, but do you like what you do? Like, do you wake up with a sense of anticipation and excitement for the day ahead? And not some kind of like fluffy, the alarm clock gets off, you're like, yay, like I get to live on purpose today. It's like, that's not true. If that's you, then it's just not true. That's all I'll say with that. But I think a lot of us don't enjoy what we do. And I think there's a bit of evidence for this. You may have heard the term if you watch the news. I'm getting to the age where I make tea at 5:30 and watch the news at 6. But you may have heard the term the Great Resignation. And this was big during 2021, where COVID revealed a lot of unsettled realities in people's lives. And so people started making changes in all sorts of ways. But one of the ways in which this played out was through their job or their career. Where in 2021, 25% of Canadians changed their careers or their job. And in a room like this, that would mean that there's a decent amount of people in this room today who changed their job or career in the last 4 years. And they say if you've survived those 4 years, then chances are you'll stick with what you're doing for the rest of your life. So if that's you, great job. Great job. They say that for a lot of pastors, if they've made it through the last 4 years, they're lifers. I'm still not convinced, but it's growing on me. But there's really two kind of things that circulate when we think about these things. And although the Great Resignation was a thing in 2021, I read this week as well that 37% of Canadians did admit via a survey that they would be open to a new job if the right opportunity arose. And so, one, this could be that we just don't enjoy what we do. Or two, we are just as people generally and genuinely discontent with life. And we find ourselves ready to grab a hold of the next opportunity that seems like there may be something promising to us for our future happiness or betterment. People debate, like I said, whether this is stabilized post-pandemic, and I don't know. But back to that question, do you like what you do? Do you find pleasure? Do you find satisfaction? Do you find a deeper meaning in what you do? And here's why this is important. What we do is central to who we are. It's central to our humanness. And I've been guilty in the last few years of my life of many times in this form of preaching messages saying, please don't associate your value or your worth in what you do, because who you are, your identity, is way more important. And that's true. Who you are is more important than what you do. And we find our identity as being created in the image of God, children of the God, and that surpasses anything. But we spend the most of our lives working. And we don't often talk about a theology of work, how God intersects with our work and what we do. We spend a lot of time looking at things and talking about things that we spend very little of our time doing. And think about it. When you meet someone and you start that awkward small talk conversation, you probably talk about the weather, and then you have nowhere else to go, and you say, so what do you do for a living? What do you do? And you don't answer with, well, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a Christian. I'm a born-again believer. Like, fill in the blank of whatever you want to insert there. You don't answer with, well, I'm a husband, and I'm a father, and other things. We just say what we do. I'm a pastor. I'm an architect. I'm a chiropractor. I'm a child and youth worker, financial advisor, fill in the blank. And that's great because we spend the vast majority of our lives working. And I also, in this series, want to broaden our definition of work. Work is way more than what you get paid for. Work is cooking supper. Work is cleaning your house. Work is running errands. Work is picking up groceries or ordering your HelloFresh boxes, which is still work. It's a scam. Don't fall for that one. It's still work. Work is keeping a budget. Work is exercising to care for your physical, mental, spiritual, social, emotional health. And I also want us to broaden our definition of rest. And this is going to take a couple of weeks, so you're not going to get it all today. But rest is so much more than a day off. And rest is so much more than the ancient discipline of Sabbath. And it's so much more than sleep, but it can include taking a nap. Really? 2 services, no amens. Okay. Rest may be time on the couch with a good book or a good movie. And to those who cringe at that thought, rest may be caring for your garden, caring for your vegetables. It may be just hanging out in the shed. Rest is going out to eat with friends. It's taking a vacation, all these good things. It's also carving out time for spiritual practices. But here's the thing. We often talk about spiritual practices in church. And even the most godly among us spend a very minority amount of our time doing those things. And that's just not the opposite of being spiritual. It's just being realistic and being human. Even if you read the entire Bible in a year, it would only take about 20 minutes a day, which is not a lot of time, and about 3 hours a week, which is not a lot of time. So where does our time go? Well, let's begin with sleep, okay? You're supposed to sleep 8 hours a week. I know I bring this up every couple of months, and I don't listen to it myself, but you're supposed to sleep 8 hours. I said week, didn't I? Yeah, that's what it feels like sometimes. Okay. This is live, too. Anyways. You're supposed to sleep 8 hours a night, which is 1/3 of every single day, where God actually created you to be a human, which means you're not God. And you're supposed to honor your human limits, and you're supposed to sleep, which would be, if it's 1/3 of your day, 1/3 of your week. And then there's work. And again, work not just in the form of maybe it's a 7 or 8 hour shift where you punch in and you punch out. Or maybe it's something a little more undefined, like being a stay-at-home parent or other things. Again, broaden our definition of work. It's easy to see how work can actually take up to more like 56 or maybe 60 or 65 hours of our week once you factor in the other things. I came really prepared this week, and I read the 2021 census for the town of Paradise. I know you're going to judge me so hard for this, but I did. Because I was thinking about this and realizing that majority of our community, I know not all of you live in Paradise, but the majority of our community doesn't work in our community. 70% of people who work in Paradise do work in a fixed workplace. That is, they don't work from home. I know 30% of people work from home. They like to talk about how amazing it is and the best thing ever, so much flexibility, and I walk the dog on my lunch break. But that's just not realistic for all of us, okay? So it's just 30%. But 70% work at a fixed workplace. But within that 70%, only 18% of people who live in Paradise work in Paradise. Only 18%. Which means that the majority of these people live outside of Paradise. And I was thinking, okay, offshore, Alberta, but that's still a minority. 78% of Paradise works here in Newfoundland, but has a daily commute, whereby 65% of those who commute at least 15 to 29 minutes each day one way. The majority of you probably spend an hour in your car just driving back and forth to work. That doesn't include all the other things that fall under the category of work. Like, let's say, I made fun of my wife a lot in the first service and she wasn't here, and she's in the second one, so this is awkward. Let's say you get in the car that you weren't the last person to drive and the gas light's on. Now you have to factor in getting gas, right? No one likes getting gas. And then you factor in picking up your coffee or picking up your lunch and all the errands that go into that. Let's say, I had another joke in the first service, but I'm going to drop that one because I was going really hard on you in the first service, but we're going to move on. Let's say, depending on your stage of life, it may have involved Avalon Mall lunch breaks and Walmarts. But anyways, let's say, depending on your stage of life, you have daycare drop-offs, school drop-offs, pickups. Let's say that you have parenting responsibilities that include volleyball, hockey, soccer, dance, cheerleading. Like, it gets overwhelming even to just talk about it, right? And again, part of the rabbit trail here is this. You get a very small amount of time every single day to rest, to do something that's other than work. And you may fill those times with spiritual disciplines and you may not. And this is not a guilt trip because it's just, again, grounding us in reality and wanting all of us to understand that what we do in our work can be a form of worship and honoring to God, and how we spend our lives is important. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be human, the balance of work and rest, and the art of being human. And it's just a short introduction from here on over, because I know I just spent probably 10 to 15 minutes really making you really interested in all this, and I'm not going to go for another 30 minutes, okay? But the question at the heart of this series is this: what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human? How do we learn to integrate all the parts of our lives together, our work and our rest? What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus at home, at work, at school, at the gym, at the mall, on our days off, when we date, who we date, and all those things? And what does it mean to be human? How do we eliminate the divide between what's spiritual and what's life, and not categorize those things? After all, Jesus wasn't just a rabbi or a teacher for 3 years. He was a carpenter for 30. And I like to think that he used his normal time of just working a blue-collar job, just thinking about all the things he would then live out and practice. He's the real image of what it means to be truly human. So what does it look like for us to integrate all of our lives, to be fully immersed into what Jesus called the kingdom of God? And to simplify it even more, the core question is simply this: what does it mean to be human? And as Lucy Quinn read the text this morning, she read not just the part where God creates human beings, but also the part where God rests, but also the part where God sets up the garden, and he says to Adam, now go and work the garden. Go and work the garden. Genesis 1:26 says this: then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. What does it mean to be human? You were created in the image of the triune God, after the likeness of the triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit. And if you read the creation story of how everything was created on the first 6 days, you see that every creature was created each according to its own kind. He made the birds of the air, each according to its own kind. The fish of the sea, each according to its own kind. But not when it comes to humans. We weren't made like other humans. We weren't made each according to its own kind. Not this creation. Rather, it says, and God said, let us, Father, Son, and Spirit, make man in our image, in our likeness. Not merely like themselves, not merely human, but also like God. We share a likeness to our Creator. The Genesis story, it sort of rivals some other ancient religious texts that were circulating in this time. And in all these ancient texts, there were deities, there were gods, and these gods weren't present. They couldn't interact with humans, and they would erect statues and images in towns where the gods could not be present to show that this place belongs to this god, this is the ruler. All the ancient deities had statues that say, this is what it means to be God. But in this text, in this story, you have a God who doesn't choose to make an idol or a statue, but rather creates humans in his image. And we are the reflection of his deity, of his righteousness, of his rule. Genesis says the real God doesn't have images or statues of this kind that you can make with your own hands, but rather he has made with his own hands, I'm dropping my H's and adding my H's, sorry mom, humans. Or as my mom would say, humans. Humans are the visible image of the invisible God. Genesis tells a story that says humans are like God, but also that God is like human. Our humanness flows from the fact of our being made in the image of God. Think about it. In this story, we see God speak and God act and God make or create. God works in organized ways, and then he brings beauty in what he makes. He looks at the things he has made, and he reflects on how good it is. He said, and it is good. At the end of day 6, when he created humans, it says, and it was very good. And then God does what? He rests. God rests. Now, this isn't all that it says about us. Verse 26 continues and says, it answers the question of why God made us. I love asking that question. For why and what were we made? Why do we exist? What are we here for? What's our meaning? What's our purpose? Verse 26 continues to say, starting in the beginning, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on earth. So you were created in the image of the triune God, so that you may have dominion. Though the king may not be physically present, his people are a reminder of his presence and reign, and his people are given dominion. Now, depending on the translation you're reading, it may say rule, it may say reign, but they all convey the same principle. God made human beings in order to rule. And we think dictatorship, we think calling the shots, but that's not what the Hebrew originally hints at. It essentially means this: God created us to work. What a letdown, hey? You were really excited for where I was going next. God created you to work. God created you to work the garden, to rule with him. And I would say at this moment, and again, we have to remember, and we're going to talk about this a little more in a couple of weeks, but this is work before it became cursed by the fall. This was work before it became labor broken by the fall. But I would say that now in this moment, because we as humans sometimes fail to see our work as redemptive, as participating, as co-laborers with God in restoring brokenness, in joining with Jesus and welcoming his kingdom of heaven to earth, we sometimes fall into the trap of treating our work as a means to an end. Most of us live our lives as if the purpose of life is the opposite of work. We work to live so that we can live and enjoy life after work, right? Just me? No? We work in order to enjoy our time off, right? We try to work hard on our days on so we can enjoy time off. The weekend mentality is the reason because of this. We work hard so that we can take vacations and travel. We work hard in order to retire early. Does anyone else want to do this, or is it just me? Not that these things are bad. They're all great. They're just not central to who we are. We will spend the majority of our lives working. And I don't know about you, but I want to find a way to find beauty and meaning and life in that. John Mark Comer says it this way: the Genesis vision of humanists is not that we work to live, but that we live to work. What does this mean? We were created in the image of the God who creates, and the God who works, and the God who rests, to rule, to join God in making something beautiful of this world. And this is why today, regardless if you're a follower of Jesus or not, you would agree with me that it's human to have the desire to make a meaningful contribution in this world. And when we make a difference in someone else's life, when we create something in our own lives, we feel pleasure about that, and we feel good. And there's actual hormones and emotions that are released in our bodies. Why? Maybe this is the best evidence of the fact that we were created after the image and the likeness of the Lord of all, the Creator. Maybe this is the best evidence in the fact that we were created in the image of God, the one who creates all things, sustains all things. And because we have his DNA, we want to do the same. You see, maybe there's no such thing as this is sacred and this is spiritual. Or this is the part of my life that I give to God, and this is the part of my life that I just live on my own. Maybe there's no such thing as well, this is ministry and this is marketplace, right? We do this all the time. Maybe this is why people who hate what they do for a living are so discontent, no matter how much money they make. And this is why when a lot of people retire, they really, really struggle, because they've lost a part of who they are. Not because work is bad, but because work is good. And we desire to find ways to work, that is, to make a meaningful contribution in the world. Why is this? Because we're created in the image of God, the God who works and the God who rests. Have you ever heard of the term burnout? It's become a thing in the last couple of years. And there are lots of theories out there as to why people burn out. And a lot of us truthfully have experienced this genuinely. But burnout culture emerged in the 1980s, and the original source, when people started putting a definition to this, was it came out of Japan, where men who were working 12-hour days and commuting 2 hours on a train to work and 2 hours home were literally dropping dead at their desk. And we know that this isn't the burnout that we're necessarily talking with. Now, you can burn out anytime your adrenal system diminishes. So when people say sometimes they need to work less hours, burnout is a thing. Working less hours doesn't always be the cure to why we feel burnt out. There's self-care, and self-care is important, but no matter how much sometimes you practice self-care, people still burn out. And I think there's sort of, burnout culture a result of how much we just generally fear so much in our lives. And we feel so much anxiousness, and we feel so much heaviness, and we feel so burdened by so many things. And I think it's because we're so aware of the weight of so many things, and we were never meant to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We were never created to try and process all that we have to process. And I love the gift of technology and social media and the news, but I think a lot of us are carrying burdens that are so heavy we were never ever meant to carry them. And we carry it all, and we don't know what to do with it. I think also burnout may be a result of not finding any existential meaning, that is God meaning, in what we do with the majority of our lives. And so we fail to see work as something that God created. And we just live going through the motions instead of seeing that work is a good thing that God created. And that's why we want to talk about it. We want to talk about not just in this series of work, but also of rest, because here's the thing. If work becomes our identity and work becomes all that we do, we may be good workers, but we may be poor humans. We can be really good at work. But when work becomes all that we do, we become more machine than human. And yet we find in God the true meaning of what it means to be human, to honor both the God-given beauty of work, but also the God-given beauty of rest. I'm going to invite the worship team back. And this morning, we are going to take a moment to create space for us to practice what I like to call listening prayer. A lot of people hate when I do this, but it's good. Trust me on it. And I noted this week as I was thinking about this, oftentimes as I think about trying to honor time limits when I preach, how did I do? Anyone timing me this morning? I try to honor times. But one of the things I've been thinking about a lot realistically is if you come to this church and the only voice you hear is mine, I'm really sorry. And I want this to be a place where we learn to rest. And if you've been here the last few weeks, you've heard me rant about this, and I'm going to continue to rant about this. And if I stop, say, how come you stopped? You chickened out, didn't you? I want this to be a space where we can hear God's voice. And I'll be the first to say that sometimes I'm poor myself at recognizing God's voice. It's something that we have to learn how to discern. And so before we sing another song today, before we go any further, and eventually I'll stop talking, I want us to stop, to cease, to be still. Psalm 46:10, I think it's verse 10. Don't quote me on that. It says, be still and know that I'm God. It's in the stillness, it's in the silence that we are able to hear his voice. And I'll give you a question to think about as we do this. The question is this. Jesus, is there something that you want me to know about my life and my work? Is it something about our work, our careers, our jobs? Is it something about our lives? And in these moments of silence, I know we're a little squirmy. It's a little awkward if we're not familiar with this, but we simply pause. And we don't empty our minds of any thought. We just be still. And part of this is learning to discern God's voice. And yes, God speaks through our thoughts, but it's learning the ability to discern what is God's thought and what is mine. When God speaks to us, oftentimes it may be a word. It may be a verse of scripture that you're familiar with or not familiar with. It may be an image. It may be a phrase. It may be stories. Like we just can't box God into a category in the way in which he speaks. But in the silence, he often does. And so we're going to take a moment, and we're going to pause, and we're going to be still, and we're going to ask this question. And then I've asked the worship team to lead us, and we'll see where it goes from there. So Jesus, as we center ourselves this morning, we simply ask you, Lord, is there something that you want to say to us? Speak to our hearts. Speak to our minds. We ask this in your name. Amen. Let's wait in God's presence for a moment.